hello. Should we just go?
Yep, sounds good.
Yeah, why not? Okay. Well, how are you both? You all okay?
All good. How are you, Mark?
Good. Bit stir crazy.
Yes. Going. Well, were you ever sane anyway?
No, not with this line of work. I don't think you can fully be sane.
You've got to be a little bit kooky, haven't you?
Yeah, that's it. Everyone's quirky in their own rights.
In their own rights. Unlike Adam, who obviously has to be very clear-cut and
Technical.
in order to sit at a computer every day, all day, just changing things. I don't know. I'm not really making any sense, but
Just
anyway,
tweaking things and
tweaking
that
things,
I don't
yeah.
know what they do.
yeah, you have to be very good at not going insane if you're probably in any post-production technical sector.
Yep.
But yeah, welcome everyone listening, viewing. We are the White Deer Filmmaking Podcast. I'm Mark.
I'm Adam,
And I'm ALASTAIR.
Excellent.
and we might be able to cut out those delays.
Yeah, maybe. Let's hope so. Just quick one. You're listening to. If anyone doesn't know by now, maybe this is the first episode for people. But yeah, you're listening to a filmmaking-centered podcast. We're filmmakers. I'm a producer, actor, writer. Guys.
Director, writer, and editor.
And I'm a DOP and colorist.
Excellent. So yes, just a quick whistle-stop tour of what we all do. I know it's very, very vague, but hey-ho. Anyway, today, the reason why I made sure to reintroduce who we are, what we do, is because our topic today, we're discussing amongst ourselves again. Our topic today is telling a story through film. Quite an expansive topic, and we probably don't have enough time to cover it all, but we'll see where we get to. A nice little summary maybe, especially from our different perspectives of filmmaking things. But first of all, what have we all been watching? Anything interesting?
Do you want to go first, Al?
Or Al?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Well, I've just started watching Money Heist. I'm in the early days of it. I'm a bit late to the party as well, but that's a Spanish TV series, which is better to watch with the actual Spanish voices than English subtitles instead. And so far, quite gripping. Been quite impressed with it so far.
Yeah.
So yes, I'd recommend that one.
Where's that? Where can that be watched?
Netflix.
Or where are you watching it? Netflix.
Netflix.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Excellent. What is particularly gripping you about it?
I think
Heist makes it sound quite tense and thrillery.
Yeah, it is. I think, well, I'm always a big fan of thriller suspense, and it certainly has a bit of that. But like I say, I'm in the early days of it, so I will have to see where it goes. But gripped so far. So, yeah.
Excellent. Nice. Brilliant. And Adam?
I've recently, not intentionally, but I thought I'd mention 2 Shia LaBeouf films that I've watched. One being The Peanut Butter Falcon, which is incredible, and the second, which I just watched the other night, being Fury, which
yes.
you guys might have seen. It's been out a while, so I assume that's
World War II tank one.
Yeah.
Shia LaBeouf craze, yeah.
I think I just think he's good in both of those. He got a lot of interest from his films last year, Honey Boy and The Peanut Butter Falcon. So, but I think he's always been pretty good. Very committed and interesting. When you see him on interviews talking about his process, and Fury in particular sounds like craziness to have worked on.
I've heard a lot of stories from the set of that.
Yeah,
especially including his Shia LaBeouf's method acting, I guess. Not showering and
Yeah,
I thought,
being
yeah,
had to be put in a different B&B to the rest of everyone who was working on it.
Yeah.
And the cut on his face was real, apparently.
Yes.
It was a
yeah,
real cut that
yeah.
he'd inflict on himself whenever it was needed. And his tooth, he apparently
Yes.
either broke out or sanded down himself.
Yeah, fun. I mean, why not? Interesting.
He's an interesting guy. But
Oh yeah, exactly.
How about
That's
you,
why
Mark?
he keeps people interested. Oh, been watching. I mentioned it to you guys last week. Good Girls on Netflix. Not something I would have typically watched myself necessarily, but was introduced to it. It's got Christina Hendricks, Matthew Lillard. I think that's what Shaggy, Mae Whitman, and Retta, who I'd seen very briefly in other things, but as an ensemble cast, incredible. And Manny Montana, I can't remember exactly his name, but anyway, yeah, very good cast. It's when I first started watching it, it's not really a spoiler to say that it's three women who are all interconnected sisters and friends, and they come across as your typical very clean-cut people. I mean, there's one that's a bit younger, it's a bit more rebellious, but they decide to, for various reasons, rob a grocery store, get embroiled in some gang issues, and spirals out of control from there. And it's about their sort of actions to combat that. And yeah, very interesting. And it's your typical. It comes across like it could have been like a 30-minute sitcom, where it's a bit tongue-in-cheek, a bit slapstick at times, but it's not. It's quite serious. Lots of very serious issues hit. Very, very good. Very good show on Netflix. Yeah. So, yes, what we want to talk about today is telling a story through film. Vague-ish, but we'll see. We'll see what comes out of it, because I think we'll all have slightly different answers. But I think that storytelling in film is very particular in that you can't do it in the same way as a book. There are similar principles, similar character arcs and things like that. They all go across the media quite nicely, and you have to be aware of certain things. But filmmaking is and can be, I think, a little bit more experimental than, say, a novel or another type, maybe comic. Obviously that's very creative as well. But there's formulas for each. But I think telling a story through film and TV can be quite experimental. Like we've done it in our films. We playing on that. I think maybe you could say that playing the narrator in a different way, like being more experimental as a narrator, is a bit more freeing and experimental in film. Just as a first statement, what do you guys think about that? About it being a bit more experimental?
Mm-hmm.
I think absolutely. So, yeah.
Yeah. It's but I mean, is that a good thing, do we think? I mean, it does allow for more options, but maybe you can be bogged down in certain amounts of non-linearity, perhaps. Mm-hmm. Maybe there's too many options at all. I mean, films keep getting made all the time, and they're very fresh, but we're getting into the age now where you could argue that, especially with like Marvel superhero films, that kind of telling of a story is getting very plain.
To keep storytelling fresh, it is really about two things, in my opinion, and that is first generating empathy for the characters and situations, and secondly connecting with a human audience on an emotional level. And you can do that through all the various mediums. To create the empathy, you have to have well-written, well-designed characters that are realistic, that people can relate to on a one-to-one basis. And it's one of the most powerful parts about storytelling through film, is when your audience see themselves in the shoes of the character. It won't be everyone. Not everyone will be able to, connect. And that's kind of where the second part comes in. It's stimulating human feelings and emotions. And that can be done by, various other things. So kind of performances, cinematography, visual effects, visual stimulation, how powerful and how amazing a scene looks. Auditorial stimulation, the power of music in film can really change the way a scene is perceived. And I'd say kind of having those two as your sort of key principles of filmmaking. Let's film be an effective tool for telling stories, which you don't have with books in the same way.
No, and also we've both written or tried to write novels as well.
Yeah.
I've not read yours, and I know you did it when you were quite young, so you probably don't want to share it. I don't know.
Not particularly.
Not particularly. I'm very much the same. But definitely with it definitely when you're writing a screenplay, it feels like what you write down on a page, and then when you hand it over to a director or producer or anyone, and there's so many different tools, I think, that can be used to convey that. Now, obviously, people adapt novels all the time, so you can still get that, but it's when it's something that's specifically made and written to be made into a film or into a TV script, then it just feels like there's so much already there which can, like you say, can be adapted, and every single one of those tools is so different. Let's take the music example, the composition, or something similar like the colour, for example. If you tweak it just ever so slightly, that changes the story incredibly. And none of them are necessarily right either. That's the interesting thing. Like, I think it's probably why directing is such a crucial part of filmmaking, is that you have to have that shared vision so that someone can say yes and no at the tail end of each stage to keep it all in line and on the same themes and everything, hitting the right tones.
It all comes down to the director's vision, really, doesn't it? And all of those things are tailored in. I love how film is like a combination of maybe in the basic sense, in a small short film, the combination of like 5 or 6 different people, maybe less, maybe a bit more. In the bigger like films that you'd see at a cinema, like in the hundreds of people's opinions and visions and creativity coming together, but it's all kind of like directed in the right direction by the director, funnily enough. So like it all does just come back to how they perceive the story, and it can be done in a number of different ways, like being more hands-on, being more hands-off with different decisions and stuff, but it is guided at least by the director, I think,
in whatever way they choose to do it, for sure. And it I think this is why it's such an interesting topic, is because taking the director and then taking their ability to share their vision with it and to explain it. We all hear stories of directors. Either, for example, George Lucas is quite regarded as being quite poor with actors, or he's just not a director who is well suited to direct actors. But if you want him to tell a visual story, he's got your back. Like he'll always do that. And various other ones like Martin Scorsese will work incredibly differently to that. Quentin Tarantino, vastly differently to that. And it's amazing how some directors stand out because they are so particular in their way of doing things. And you, taking the film aside, I think people want to work with the directors just to see how they're going to tell that story. their knowledge of what tools they can use, what they've been granted in terms of what funding they have, what budget's available, all the different things. And maybe they have a composer that they've worked with previously. They know that they can tell their story using those, I don't want to refer to people as tools, but those assets, if you like, available to them.
Yeah, it is that toolkit, that new,
absolutely, yeah.
And that changes like constantly through the years, like visual effects becoming more of the toolkit, and even going from film to digital shooting, that's a different tool that you can use to your benefit. And I think film really works for me when it is being used as a tool rather than as like a gimmick. Like, you're not just putting visual effects in for the sake of it, but you're using it either because it makes the shooting cheaper, potentially doing it afterwards, but at the same time you lose a bit of like that reality that you're trying to create on set. So then it becomes the choice of sometimes like budgetary and all that, but sometimes what you actually want to do on set and what you want to do in post, and how the actors are going to react better to that. And you just like build all these decisions that the director and the core like heads of departments make, is kind of this web of decisions that actually ends up making a film in the long run, and kind of against all odds, bringing all these people together and making all these decisions that either turns out as you intended or not, as I'm sure a lot of directors may have got to the end and thought, well, this isn't anything like what I intended. Sure. Maybe it's better, maybe it's worse.
I know you've had experiences like that, Al, where you've envisioned a particular shot or something quite vital in your view of how to tell this story, how to unfold it, and those shots just haven't worked. When you've looked back at them and you thought, that's just not like coming out as what it was in my head.
Yep, like in here, it can be the perfect shot or the perfect line or anything. Just something that I've convinced myself is quintessential to that scene and in that moment. But then seeing it in post-production afterwards and trying to fit it into the overall storytelling, it no longer serves its purpose, or it doesn't fit, or it just never sort of delivered in the first place. It's also getting rid of the heartbreaking part of being a director is being able to detach yourself at times once the filming is done, and being able to step back and say, right, how much of this is just gratuitous and how much of it actually serves your characters, serves your story. Because you can convince yourself that some lines are essential, that some shots are essential, but not always. And I think that's kind of on top of kind of having shots that don't quite sort of come off. You can also have things that do come off, but then no longer serve a purpose in your story anymore. It's the other side of it. So,
yeah, for sure. We've had a recent experience of that, haven't we?
We have.
There's a whole thought process in our most recent film, Conviction Without Remorse, which we just decided to not get rid of. That would be the wrong thing to say, because it's still very much a part of how we see the story going, but just not essential in order to express the story in the filmmaking format. If it was a novel, for example, where you have, because here's another point about it. There are restrictions. So there are restrictions from budgetary restrictions, time restrictions. Yeah. I know there's advice in terms of how long a novel should be. There's advice when you're a beginner novelist, keep it quite short so it's not an epic fantasy right from the start. Yeah. There's advice like that and restrictions that are advised, but really you can write whatever you want. to sell a film, it's a little bit more. Not, it follows the same principle, but there's a hell of a lot more people involved with that, I would say.
And it also depends on the end place that it's going to be shown, the format, whether it's a short. For sure. Yeah. And that's something that we've been going back and forth with what actually is a short as well. Because technically, I mean, it could be anything less than a feature-length film, and feature-length films may start, at least if you bought a DVD, you'd probably struggle to find a feature film being any less than an hour and 20 minutes would be quite a short feature.
Yeah. But the BFI and the AFI, the American Film Institute and the British Film Institute, and even the Oscars, all the different film festivals all have a slightly different definition of what a short film, where that ends essentially, and it's like, what do you do?
Yeah, and we also
but how do you tell
that
a story in different times? Crazy.
Yeah, and we also obviously have those brackets as well for our with our festival for our short, micro short, and feature categories. So, but I think it is a drastically different going from a 45-minute to an hour kind of short film between that and kind of like a 10-minute, 15-minute short is a completely different entity as well. I mean, it is obviously 45 minutes is more alike to kind of a TV episode than what you may typically think of as a short. But yeah, there's a lot of different requirements, I'd say, and if you are doing a 15-minute film, you need to kind of like keep the pace at not necessarily a fast pace, because some films don't need a fast pace, but you need to keep the pace at what's right for the film, not have any bits dragging necessarily. I mean, because you can have a slow paced film, but if it all doesn't drag, then and it holds your attention and everything, then it would seem as if it's the perfect length. But it is so interesting to see what you may be, because our story, and probably a lot of people's stories, could be a short, could be a feature, could be a TV series or whatever. So there's big decisions there of what to have as the short version of the story, what you'd include more in the film version, what you'd have as the TV series, like episodic version as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it may sound obvious, but there's a very particular mindset with each different expression. So a short is very different to a TV show, very different to a feature film. And I think I don't know if you'd agree with me, Al. It's about when you unload different beats. Like, where do you sort of end each chapter, if you like? Because obviously, let's take an 8-episode TV series. You've got 8 chapters to work with. Now, you could take those 8 chapters or those 8 beats and say, right, I'm going to take those, put them into a feature film. You've then got less time, but maybe more complete time in the sense of you've got to compress those 8 chapters. But maybe it flows slightly better. So each, because you've got more in a TV show, because you've got more in that hour, you've got 8 hours to play with, you've got to fill that more. So you can have lots of different side stories and everything like that. So condensing it down into like maybe 2 hours or so means that you have to tell a more rigid story, and then obviously short films even more so. But it's about offloading those beats correctly. I'm definitely saying that with a pinch of salt. to the audience. And that I think that's, for me, that's where the art is in telling a story through film, is when to hit those certain beats,
when to reveal information, when to withhold it. And that's also interesting, coming off the back of last week's episode, talking with Tom and Julian of the Deadly Promises film, as they were considering whether to take their feature, as it is now, in the direction of like a web series, or or the film that it actually ended up being. And then obviously you I'm sure there's been, for me anyway, watching TV series that you'd think could have quite easily been a few episodes shorter, or a film. And then there's films that you could think, well, I'd quite like to know more about that could quite happily have needed. Because if we, the only like figures that I have at the top of my head, which is what we're also, the subject matter is what we're also talking about privately, me and you in a way, Mark, because you're watching Devs and I've finished watching Devs, and that was about 6 hours 45 in total. And you just kind of think, and that's kind of interesting as well, because the director has done 2 films previous to this, so he's packed his story on those into a shorter time period, maybe like a 2-hour long film. I guess Ex Machina and Annihilation were. So yeah, then that he's obviously made that choice somewhere along the lines to think that this story is big enough
that
to
he needs a bit longer,
go over 8 episodes, 6 hours 45, and you kind of can't imagine Devs in a 2-hour film. I can't really imagine how that would be.
The tone would have to change completely. I mean, one of the tools of that show is the lingering on characters, staying with them for maybe that 10 seconds extra that you wouldn't have the option to do in a film. But it just adds to the characterization, which you were referring to earlier, Al, in just how do you express the strength of each character. Different ways to do it. TV shows do it differently to films. But maybe that's it. To a degree, is they can be non-standard, but maybe it's the characters of the films and TV shows. It's just about how you explore the information regarding them, and that is literally it. Just that art form. We could go into so much depth in different sectors, but
that's it. It's exploring the sort of the non-verbal side. Again, if we compare with books with films, a book will explore, will have it almost documented, every feeling and every thought that every character has, and you'll read it, and that's how you interpret it. But in a film, it's much more about the subtext that's going on underneath every scene. And I think that's perhaps one of the strengths of film, is being able to explore the subtext, because I think every interaction you have with anyone in the real world has a certain level of subtext to it, whether we like to deny it or not. But that's real, and therefore seeing it in film format, and when it's done right, you're not having sort of a narrative dialogue that's explaining every thought and feeling of every character as you would in a book. It's what can be told by this look, what can be told by that hand gesture.
Just can we go into a little bit more detail on that, Al, from your perspective as a director?
Sure.
So when you are envisioning the expression of a story, do you know, for example, that you really want this character to give a side glance at this particular point, or is that something that you, in your experience, just comes from doing on the day? Maybe it's different each time, but just your thoughts on that.
It can vary sort of scene to scene. Sometimes I kind of feel it starts when you're writing a script, and when you're going back over it, you will sort of start to pick out lines that don't really fit anymore, or they just aren't needed because it's a line of dialogue that wouldn't necessarily feel right to be said and can be shown instead.
Yeah.
And I think in terms of displaying it sort of on production on the day, that sort of comes down to two things: the director's work with the actors, being able to understand and highlight key feelings and emotions that those characters will have in that moment.
Yeah.
But also the power actors can bring, that sometimes they will do something that they feel feels right, and 9 times out of 10 it is right for that moment.
To bring you in here, Adam, because that's a very good point. I'm gonna say it was James Dean. I think maybe, but anyway, a famous actor once said that he had a page of script to work with, or several small paragraphs or whatever, and he said, "Look, I can tell all of that in one look. I can do that." But to bring you in as a DOP, Adam, do you both think then that visually you can tell the story, take away all the dialogue? I mean, obviously there are quite a great many silent films, but taking away dialogue, maybe the crux of a film could be relied on to be told through visuals and through maybe a really good soundtrack, for example. That is
something
certainly possible.
Yeah, that's something that where it differs quite a lot from books, because you could have kind of at least kind of a paragraph describing how the scene looks, how the room that they're in or the landscape that they're in is, whereas you can show that in kind of a second of, although obviously it takes a lot of production design and everything to make that happen, and coordination and stuff, but visually in the end film it does come out quite quick, and you don't need to physically describe what people are wearing, where they are, anything like that, because it is captured there. And that, I think, that is also was one of the goals when I worked on the film Cradle as well, that I did with our friend and actor Joe Facer, who also wrote it as well. But there's no dialogue in that, and we wanted to try and tell the story on kind of 3 pillars, which were our kind of 3 main areas of abilities, really, on the cinematography, on Joe's acting, and writing as well, and then also the score. And it was just an experimentation, really, to see if we could tell the story on those 3, if it worked, if you stripped back the dialogue, if you stripped back a lot of other things, everything else was quite minimal. Can you tell a story based on those 3 things? And I think you can.
2 people, essentially 2 people, and I think you incorporated in was it Hamish to do the composition?
Hamish Dickinson did the original score for it as well.
Yeah. So essentially 3 people, and you've told this very emotional story. I remember watching that. It's really good.
It is actually one of our films that's one of the films that is actually watchable. So we can put a link to that.
Not at all. Yeah, but you can. But like logistically, physically, you can actually watch that now, because it's not on the festival. It's not because it's the only one with actual quality.
Yeah, I see how those words were wrong now.
Well, yes, but you can, if you want to watch that right now. You sure can, and we'll link to
it's
that.
Highly, as a film, you can watch it. It's highly unwatchable. You won't enjoy it, but it is there. It's accessible, at least.
Yeah, and it's only like 5 minutes long, isn't it? So if you've got 5 minutes to spare, I'd have a box of tissues handy, because it's a bit emotional. But yeah, What about your thoughts on that, Al, about the
It's-
telling it visually with a soundtrack, for example? And
Yep.
I'm not going to say nothing else, but
Yeah. Every shot can be purposeful. Every shot tells the story, even a shot that doesn't necessarily have a character in it. When you play with the movements, the angles, the heights, the depth of fields, there's a lot you can actually tell without dialogue altogether, you know? And even simple things like the positioning of a character on screen, how much space do they have? How much movement is incorporated? Is the character nervous? Does the camera need to be shaky? Is it quite an action-packed scene where it needs to be quite flashy and snappy in the edit? All purposeful. And the music kind of goes hand in hand with that. They kind of complement each other quite nicely. Sometimes you'll even have a music track that in mind first that might dictate what the scene needs to be like, how it needs to be edited together.
yeah.
Otherwise, sometimes it just doesn't fit. But yeah, you can definitely tell a powerful story without dialogue, and cinematography and music play a massive part in that.
And there's also those choices as well that Al was just talking about, like positioning of the character in the frame and all things like the set and everything. They're things that I believe that the viewer that's watching it is whether consciously or unconsciously that believing that they're things that we've intentionally put there as the filmmakers. So if we're not thinking about all of those things, then we've got kind of unintentional things in there that the viewer is watching and thinking that we've put in there for a reason, or even unconsciously that becomes part of our film. So that's the amount of like detail that you need to go into, making sure that you want the character, the actor standing in that place in the frame. You want there to be like a vase on the other side of the frame, or you want there to not be a vase and nothing, like a white wall. They're all things that kind of that we have to make the decisions on.
Yeah. And beyond that, like you can have the same shot, and if you just change the colour up, it changes the tone dramatically. It's just amazing what you can do with very little.
That we have to make them intentional, whether something is a bit greener or a bit bluer or a bit warmer. We make those decisions, and that's what ultimately ends up as the film, as a series of decisions that come from initially the writing and the direction, but then passed down to all of the different departments and people that are bringing their talents to the work as well. That's where it all comes from, and guided along the way by the director, with hopefully some good ideas from the cast and crew as well along the way. And but that really also comes from the director selling you on the vision, really. If everyone's sold, if everyone's working towards the same goal, I'd say that's one of the most important things to make sure in the pre-production phase, as a director, that everyone's heading in the right direction. So when it comes to it on the set, everyone knows the intention and where the film needs to go, so they can suggest something that's not wildly off. That if anything, it just needs a bit of fine tuning to get towards the director's vision, but it is basically kind of in the right ballpark of the story that's being told. It's just handed down to all these different people's decisions, and that's where the craziness of filmmaking comes into for me. Like how a film gets made is crazy, especially when even with 10, 15 people on set, moving up to the bigger scale things, like how everyone is heading
exactly the right direction.
It's a kind of an amazing thing to be part of, and one of the things that's the most that makes you want to do it the most, I think, when you see all of these people coming together for a common goal.
Yeah. I've often started relating it to an aircraft. You think, how in the world does that thing actually fly? But when you look at it in closer detail, you see that there's so many little components which you have to have working perfectly in order to create that.
And eventually looking effortlessly as well.
Exactly. Film. Yes. Yeah. Because that's it with a film. You wonder how do you get to that stage where you can actually make a film? Because there's so many different little components which you have to get right. And you do hear about stories of films just being so chaotic, yet fortunately it worked. That's, I would argue, that's out of the ordinary. Otherwise, that is so often going to lead to disaster, because obviously when you've got a big amount of people and they're all free to do their own thing, without that kind of overall vision, you're going to get some interesting results, and it's not always going to be...
It's not going to align.
Yes, yeah.
And even if you see a film that you don't necessarily like, that you don't think has worked that well, there's so much that's typically gone into making it that's...
Just as a production.
Yeah, that's like so many places where a film could have gone wrong, that I think it's a miracle that more films don't go wrong, that there is that there is that joint vision, because you have to be working as a crew of people with kind of one brain kind of thing. It's amazing when it's pulled off right, and there is a lot of good stuff that you can watch these days. So
for sure,
obviously
lots
people
of good
are
stories.
People are doing really good stuff, and we see a lot of it in the festival and like onto Netflix and at the cinema and things like that. So it's
positive sides.
Yeah, it's a great time to be working in film.
For sure. Right then, so I mean, we could go on for hours because there's so many different things you could talk about. But I think that's a nice little whistle-stop tour through filmmaking, storytelling through film. Obviously, if there's anything that we've said which has captured anyone's interest particularly, we can go into further detail, and with pleasure as well. But yeah, we'll sort of wrap the main topic of the conversation up there, unless anyone has any final words particularly. No? Yeah. I mean, the trouble is, if you say one thing, you can open a door into talking about
for sure
something like forever. So yeah, that's sort of our instant take. Yours might be different, so let us know what you think, whether you agree or disagree, whatever. We'd love to hear it. But thank you for listening so much. We do, of course, have a code for you this week, and I will just get it up for you now. So make sure you have your device, pen and paper. I will always vote for the pen and paper, of course. Even pencil. Let's go even further back in time. A quill? Yeah, go for it. But anyway, the code. WDPOD333. Again, that's WDPOD333. And as always, that's 10% off for this week. So if you are listening to this in the future, unfortunately you've missed out on this one, but stay tuned for our next one. Yeah, that's it really. Hope you've enjoyed our little ramble. Any final words, guys?
Look forward to talking to you next week or next time.
Absolutely.
Stay safe, stay alert.
Stay safe, stay alert. All the buzzwords.
Follow the government's advice.
Yeah, go out, but don't go out.
Or stay in and watch many stories on your TV. Yeah. There we go. Bring it back. Okay, thank you very much for listening, everyone, and have a great day.
Bye.